Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about graphing inequalities, but we also have to add on a new step. So this is section 3, day 2, graphing inequalities. Okay, and the only difference today is that you have to solve for y for the inequality before you graph it. Now we've solved for y before in several other units, but we haven't done it yet for inequalities, so we're going to take a few minutes, go over a couple of examples where we're solving for y. Okay, so remember our steps for solving for y. Your first step, and I would write this down, is to move your x's. Okay, move your x's to the other side. Okay, so we're going to have to gather x's on the other side. Second thing, okay, divide by the number in front of y. Okay, divide by the number in front of y. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a try. Okay, so our first step is to move our x's, so we got to move these 3 x's right here. So let's undo that positive 3x with a subtracting 3x. Okay, so we'll subtract 3x on both sides. Those 3's cancel out over here. And let's bring down everything that we have. So we have a 6y, we have a less than or equal to, and we have these two terms. We have a 12 and we have a negative 3x. Well, we know that those can't be added together. They're different terms. So we need to bring them down separately. So we got a negative 3x and a positive 12. Okay, so we've got our first step done there. Okay, so first step is complete, and we got to move on to our second step, which is divide by the number in front of y. Well, in this case, our number in front of y is 6. So in each term, we're going to divide by 6. Okay, and then it's a division test. We've done this tons of times. Okay, so these 6's, they cancel out, and we have a y is less than or equal to, and then you have minus 3/6. Well, what's another name for minus 3/6? Well, if you reduce that, that would give you a negative 1/2. And then, of course, 12 divided by 6 would give us 2. Okay, so you'll notice that now we're in our situation that we were in yesterday, where you're given your inequality in slope-intercept form, and then you can go about graphing it. Okay, so remember, our first step in graphing is to graph our y-intercept. Okay, so there's our y-intercept, and let's go ahead and put a y-intercept at 2. Okay, so we go up 1, 2, on our y-axis and plot a point. Okay, so that's our y-intercept, our b. Next part is our slope. Our slope is always m, and we apply that from our y-intercept. So from that y-intercept, we're going to go down 1 and over 2. So you should have a negative sloping line because you have a negative slope in front of your slope there, or negative sign in front of your slope. Okay, so now you have two decisions. You have to decide if it's a dashed or a solid line and which way to shade. Okay, now if you look at your inequality here, you can see that you have a less than or equal. So we know that we need to have a solid line. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw our solid line in here. Okay, so there's our solid line. That's our first decision. Second decision, we got to decide which way we're going to shade. And since our inequality says less than, we're going to shade everything underneath our line. Okay, so today's no different, except that you have to solve for y before we can go ahead and start graphing. Okay. All right, let's try one more example, and then we will wrap it up for the day. But before we do that, I have a quick joke for you. All right, here's the joke for you. Why did the insomniac man get arrested? Think about it. Think about it. He resisted arrest. Anyway. All right, let's try one more example. Okay, now we need to solve this for y. Okay, so our first step, like we talked about earlier, was to move our x's to the other side. So let's undo this positive x by subtracting x on both sides. Okay, so those x's would cancel out, and then we bring down everything else we have. We have a negative y, we have a less than sign, and then you have your negative x and positive 6. So we have to bring those down separately. So we have a negative x and a positive 6 to move down to our next line there. Okay, now we need to do our second step, which is to divide each term by the number in front of y. Well, we can go ahead and envision that there's a negative 1 in front of the y here. So let's divide each side, or each portion here, by negative 1. Okay, now when you divide everything by negative 1, essentially you're just changing the sign. So instead of a negative y, we'll have a positive y. Instead of a negative x, we'll have a positive x. And instead of a positive 6, you'll have a negative 6. Okay, so then, since you divided each side by a negative, we have to flip the sign. So instead of less than, you have greater than. So our final solution here, y is greater than x minus 6. All right, now we can go ahead and graph this guy. And so we know that our y-intercept is going to be our negative 6. And so let's go down 6 and plot a point. Okay. And then you have our slope of 1. Okay, so you got a slope of 1 in front of that x. But remember, you have to have a rise and a run. So you would have a slope of 1 over 1. Okay, so from our y-intercept, we're going to go up 1, over 1, and plot a new point. Okay, and then, of course, like we've talked about, you got to make your two decisions. Well, since you have a greater than sign for your inequality, that means you're going to have a dashed line. Okay, so through here, let's go ahead and make a dashed line. Okay, and lastly, after your first decision's made, we got to decide which way we're going to shade. And we're going to shade all the y values that are greater than our value. Okay, so let's go ahead and shade everything that has a y value that is greater than the line. So everything that is greater, we're going to shade above. Okay, so all these ordered pairs up here would end up being solutions to our inequality. Okay, so today's no different. We're just adding in a skill that we've already learned and then graphing. All right, see ya.